All right, so we're diving into something that's, well, frankly, pretty relevant these days, voting reform.
It's a hot topic, that's for sure.
And this proposal we came across, well, it kind of grabbed our attention. Instead of making things more complex, it goes in a completely different direction.
Right, completely different.
It's all about, get this, using simple smartphones, like think almost like burner phones, but just for voting.
Yeah, like you just grab one from a bin at City Hall.
Exactly. It's like, can simplicity actually be the key to security and anonymity in voting? And that's what we're digging into today. This proposal that we found. Just to give you a little background, it's called. Well, the title's not that important.
Right.
What matters is the idea. Right.
Absolutely. The idea is what matters.
So let's start with the basics. For listeners who maybe aren't familiar with all the ins and outs of voting tech,
Right.
this proposal, it basically says everyone eligible to vote, they get a free smartphone from the government. But here's the thing. This phone, it's only good for voting. That's it.
Yeah, and that's a really important point because what we're seeing here is a shift away from this idea that more complex technology automatically equals more security.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, and this proposal argues this quite strongly, sometimes limiting the functionality of a device can actually make it more secure, more resistant to attacks.
So you're saying that like a really stripped down device, basically just a touch screen and a voting app,
Yeah.
that's harder to hack.
Think about it. Think about it like this. Fewer functions, fewer avenues for a hacker to exploit. It's a smaller attack surface, right?
Right.
And it's not a new concept, really. We already see this with things like those chip and PIN readers for credit cards.
Yeah.
They're incredibly secure because they have one job and one job only.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so I can kind of see how that might work from a security standpoint. But, and I think this is on a lot of people's minds, how can you be sure that your vote is actually anonymous with this system?
Absolutely. And that's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
This proposal addresses anonymity on a couple of levels.
Okay.
So first, the phone itself, it's linked to a unique code, not your name, not your driver's license, not your social security number, none of that. And second, once these phones are all passed out, even the government, they wouldn't know which specific phone belongs to you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it completely disconnects your identity from your vote in a way that's just not possible with traditional voting methods.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's interesting and honestly kind of reassuring, at least on that front. But, the proposal doesn't stop there, right? It also goes into this whole other area, this whole referendum system. And I got to say, this is where things got really interesting for me.
Yeah, the referendum system is fascinating.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about, voting for candidates. This is about having a more direct say in the issues that matter to people.
Right, right.
So they're proposing a two-tier system, right?
Yeah.
You got one tier where the government can put forth referendums on, pressing issues, important stuff,
Yeah.
keeping citizens engaged.
Keeps things moving.
Exactly. Keeps the conversation going. But then the second tier, that's where things get really, really interesting because that's where citizens, everyday people, they can actually propose their own referendums.
Wait, hold on. So you're telling me with this app, I could potentially get a referendum on the ballot, just like that?
That's the idea. And it really makes you think, would this kind of direct participation, would it lead to a more engaged citizenry? Could it even reshape how we talk about politics?
Honestly, it's kind of a lot to take in. That would be a huge shift, wouldn't it?
It would be a seismic shift. There's no doubt about that. And of course, anytime you're talking about technology and data, particularly in something as important as elections, you got to talk about privacy.
Absolutely. That's got to be a major concern for people.
And it should be. It absolutely should be. But what this proposal tries to do, at least from what I can see, is find a balance.
Okay, how so?
So it maintains the anonymity of your individual vote. That's a non-negotiable.
Right.
But it also allows for the collection of aggregate data.
So, how many people voted a certain way in a particular region, but you can't see individual votes?
Exactly. That's the key. Think of it like exit polls that we have now.
Right, right.
They give you a sense of how people are voting, but you don't know who said what. It's just the overall trends. And that kind of data, that's important, right?
Yeah.
It helps political scientists, the media, all sorts of folks make sense of elections.
So you're saying it's like having your cake and eating it too. You get to keep your privacy, but we also still get valuable insights into voting patterns.
That's the goal, at least according to this proposal. Now, of course, we have to address the elephant in the room.
The cost.
Exactly. Millions of smartphones, even simple ones. That's not cheap.
No, it definitely sounds like a significant upfront cost. But, I mean, I'm just thinking out loud here. Couldn't it potentially save money in the long run?
That's the argument they're making, and it's not entirely without merit. Think about the costs associated with our current system, printing all those paper ballots, renting out polling places, staffing them, transporting everything.
Yeah, no, that's a ton of logistics, tons of moving pieces.
And all of that, well, that costs money. This system, it streamlines all of that. So over time, who knows? It might actually be more cost effective.
Interesting. And I guess there's also the cost-benefit analysis that's harder to quantify. Like, how do you measure something like increased voter turnout or renewed trust in the democratic process? Those are things you can't really put a price tag on, right?
Exactly. And that's what makes this proposal so fascinating. It's not just about the nuts and bolts of voting. It's about the bigger picture, the societal impact.
And that's something for our listeners to ponder as well. This proposal really challenges us to reconsider how we approach elections. It really does. Is it about sticking with what's familiar, or are we willing to try something radically different if it means potentially making our democracy more secure, more transparent, and more participatory? That's the question, isn't it?
It really is.
And on that note, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. We'll be back next week with another thought-provoking look at the future of, well, everything.